Before Goldman Sachs, Warren Buffett, and long before Wall Street was filled with hedge funds, crypto bros, and TikTok finance gurus, there were a few families who built an empire so powerful they wrote the blueprint for American capitalism and then disappeared from history books. Today, we uncover the forgotten empire that built Wall Street, the one you've probably never heard of. Okay, maybe you have, but whose shadow still looms over the financial world. To understand the empire that built Wall Street, we need to go back not to the 1920s, but to the late 1700s. At the heart of New York City, Wall Street wasn't the towering monument of finance we know today. It was a dirt road lined with wooden fences. But in just a few decades, it would become the most powerful financial center in the world. So, who were the key players, and how did they lay the foundation for the system we use today? The man most responsible for starting this transformation was Alexander Hamilton. As the first U.S. Treasury Secretary, he laid the groundwork for the American financial system by creating the first national bank and inviting investors to stake their claim in a fledgling country. But Hamilton didn't do it alone. Alongside him was a man named John Jacob Astor, a German immigrant who built the first real estate empire in New York. By the time of his death in 1848, Astor was the wealthiest man in America. Astor's wealth was so vast that it would be hard to fathom today. Adjusted for inflation, Astor would be worth over $150 billion today. Yet, despite his vast fortune and influence, Astor was often overlooked in the pages of history. But it wasn't just about one man. These early moguls laid the groundwork for the banking families that would follow and shape the financial world for generations. One name that towers over this early era is J.P. Morgan. Morgan wasn't just a banker. He was a savior of the U.S. economy. In 1907, during a massive market panic, Morgan single-handedly saved the nation by using his own fortune to prop up failing banks and stabilize the economy. Without him, the U.S. may have experienced a depression far worse than anything it had ever seen before. Morgan's rise to power didn't begin with the dramatic rescue, though. His empire started with a mentor, George Peabody, a merchant banker in London who taught Morgan how to wield financial power. Peabody helped Morgan establish his career, and later his bank, J.P. Morgan and Company Morgan's Bank, was not just any bank. It was a private institution that catered only to the elite. He had the connections to open doors for powerful industrialists, foreign governments, and political leaders. Over time, J.P. Morgan and Company became synonymous with high-stakes finance. But what were the other families up to during this time? The Astors, Vanderbilts, and Mellons were also building their fortunes, though in very different ways. The Astors built a real estate empire, controlling much of Manhattan's prime land. They invested in luxury hotels and properties that would increase in value for generations. The Vanderbilts made their money from the railroads, building the New York Central Railroad, one of the most profitable railroads in the world at the time. And the Mellons, they made their mark in oil, steel, and coal, all while investing heavily in early 20th century industrial giants. Each of these families had different ways of making their wealth, but they all had one thing in common. Their grip on American industry was unshakable. They didn't just create industries, they controlled them. These families didn't get rich by chance. They followed methods that still shape the world today. Their tactics were often based on long-term strategy rather than quick gains. Let's look at some of the ways they amassed and maintained their fortunes. Interlocking boards. Many of these families used interlocking boards, a practice in which a few powerful families controlled the majority of American industries by sitting on the boards of each other's companies. This allowed them to control everything from banking to railroads to utilities with very little competition. It wasn't about owning the whole company. It was about owning enough to influence decisions and policies. Private banking. Unlike today's retail banks, J.P. Morgan and Company was a private bank. Their clients weren't just customers, they were invited into the inner circle. By offering exclusive services and handpicking their clients, these families created an elite network that operated behind closed doors. This helped them build trust, which is the currency of the wealthy. and kept their businesses free from the interference of the masses. Real estate hoarding. The Astors, for example, didn't sell their land, they hoarded it, leveraging it to create even more wealth. They weren't interested in quick profits from selling property. Instead, they kept building their real estate empire, and when times were tough, they refinanced or leased out land to keep it profitable. The Astor real estate portfolio, much of it still standing today, made their family's fortune grow exponentially over time. Although these families are no longer in the public eye, their legacies are still very much alive and still control the world. JP Morgan's bank is now JP Morgan Chase, the largest and most influential bank in the US. The Mellons laid the foundation for Mellon Bank, and their influence stretches across various industries, including technology and finance. The Astors, their properties in Manhattan are worth billions today, and their legacy is embedded in the very skyline of New York. So, why don't you hear about these families anymore? The answer is simple. Old money vanishes on purpose. Unlike today's tech billionaires who flaunt their wealth and often seek the public eye, old money prefers to operate behind the scenes. It's about building something that lasts, a quiet, sustainable legacy that can be passed down to future generations. The Astors, the Morgans, the Mellons, they understood this. They didn't need the public's attention. They only needed to control. The forgotten empire that built Wall Street still lives, not in name, but in influence. These families may have faded into obscurity, but their methods, strategies, and legacy are still a part of the financial system we use today. Their playbook became the foundation for everything from investment banks to multinational conglomerates. The idea of generational wealth, of long-term landholding, of silent partnerships and shadow influence, these didn't just survive, they thrived and they evolved. Modern hedge funds, for example, may look radically different from JP Morgan's circle of elite clients, but they operate on the same principles: tight control, insider access, and an us versus them mentality that keeps ordinary investors locked out of the real decision-making rooms. Family offices, private wealth management firms serving ultra-rich families still use the Astor model of holding assets privately, tax advantageously, and indefinitely. And what about private equity? Its roots go back to these empires too. Just like Morgan leveraged connections to influence entire industries, today's PE firms quietly acquire businesses, restructure them, and extract profits without the glare of public markets. It's consolidation behind the curtain, just like the old days. But the legacy isn't just economic, it's cultural. These old money dynasties created the archetype of the invisible billionaire. Unlike the loud live streaming millionaires of today, the Astors and Morgans preferred discretion over recognition. Their names aren't trending, but their fingerprints are on everything from city skylines to Ivy League endowments. And yet their methods weren't without consequences. These early empires helped solidify the wealth gap in America by locking up land, consolidating industry, and limiting competition. They made it nearly impossible for outsiders to break into their circles. They created a closed system, efficient, profitable, and nearly impenetrable. Even today, studies show that family wealth in America is stickier at the top than almost anywhere else in the developed world. That's not a glitch in the system. It's part of the design. At the same time, these families built the scaffolding for stability. The Federal Reserve itself was born out of the 1907 panic that JP Morgan helped resolve. Without his intervention, the US may have spiraled into a deeper depression. In that sense, their influence wasn't just selfish, it was systemic. The very institutions we rely on today, central banking, corporate law, even real estate finance, owe their origins to these families' experiments in wealth and power. And while they may not dominate headlines, the descendants of these dynasties still sit on the boards of major institutions, run philanthropic foundations, and control family trusts that quietly direct billions. Their power has simply changed shape, morphing from tycoons in top hats to lawyers, trustees, and anonymous donors who guide policy and markets from the shadows. In the end, the story of Wall Street isn't just a story of numbers, it's a story of vision, ambition, and legacy. The forgotten empire may have slipped out of the textbooks, but it never left the game. It just learned how to play it better than anyone else. Because the truth is, money doesn't disappear, it hides. And the people who built Wall Street, they're still here. You're just not supposed to see them. If you want to understand today's financial elite, look at the ones who came before them. Follow the money's shadow or simply subscribe to the Wealth Archives.